Holding someone accountable is not an attack. There may not also be a tea party. Accountability Africa is designed to always ask questions on how our commonwealth is being handled. And from the private sector, we pry into their customer service operations. Accountability Africa. Hello there, and welcome to another edition of Accountability Africa on AIT. I am Ojon Bello. Deadly plane crashes in military operations and series of mishaps in its civil operations have raised fresh concerns over safety of the airspace in general. Aviation stakeholders said though the development was a blight on Nigeria's safety record in global aviation, the sequence of occurrences raises a red flag to warrant new precautionary measures to avert more disasters, especially in rainy seasons. Specifically, they called for independent investigation of all recent crashes in military operations, public disclosure of findings and recommendations, a Marshall Plan of action, and proper funding for both military and civil operations as critical arms of security and the economy. Both military and civil aviation have lately recorded very disturbing incidences, though not necessarily connected. Prior to that Black Friday's NAF 203 plane crash that killed the Chief of Army Staff and 10 others, a similar Beechcraft King 350 airplane had crashed in February, killing all 8 officers on board. Later, a Nigerian Air Force fighter jet was declared missing and suspected to have crashed. While Boko Haram claimed to have shot it down, the military spoke in denial. On the civil aviation front, both aero contractors and MAX Air commercial airplanes had bird strikes recently, making air returns shortly after takeoff. Aero contractors recorded engine issues mid-air, forcing it to make an air return to Kano. Before it was grounded by the Nigeria Civil Aviation Authority (NCAA), Asma Air recorded series of mishaps, including a loss of landing wheel on arrival in Lagos. The incidents followed a trend that should worry both the regulators and handlers of aviation generally. Some experts are, however, saying, given the central role of the armed forces in combating insurgencies, it was important to disabuse public minds linking crashes to operational carelessness, negligence, or sabotage. While the NCAA regulates civil aviation, the military is self-regulated by its own standard operating procedures. Apparently in sync with the general view, the Accident Investigation Bureau, Nigeria AIBN, has been mandated by the Nigeria Air Force to lead the investigation into the last crash of a military aircraft that claimed the life of former Chief of Army Staff. The flight data recorder FDR and the cockpit voice recorder CVR from the Beechcraft 350 aircraft have been recovered and investigation has commenced. Aviation security consultant and former commandant of the Lagos airport in the 90s, Group Captain John Ojikutu, retired, was particularly worried about the role of inclement weather in air mishaps during the rainy season. Ojikutu said the concerns on airspace safety might not necessarily be because of the number of crashes within a short period, but more about insecurity and its divisive effects on the country, with reference to C-130 plane that in 1992 killed about 90 officers in Lagos. President of the Aviation Safety Roundtable Initiative, ASRTI, a think tank group of the sector, Dr. Gbenga Olowo said, given that 2 of the 4 Beechcraft King 350 aircraft in the fleet of the Nigeria Air Force crashed in quick succession, it is time to ground NAF 202 and NAF 204, especially if they are same aircraft type, pending the investigation reports. Olowo added then that the prevailing security challenges could not be exonerated, but far-reaching remedial measures will have to be taken. Continuing, he said that our numero uno army chief has fallen this way is a case too many. Remember, the vice president narrowly escaped death in a civil chartered operation. Security issues are delicate, but frequent Air Force crashes in one single year within a space of 5 months could be due to poor oversight functions by supervising authority, positive of funds for routine maintenance, training, and retraining, unquote. Now, also at stake in all of this is Nigerian civil aviation safety record in the global community. Before the quorum, aviation's Bell helicopter crash that killed 3 crew members in Okpebi, Lagos, Nigeria Aviation had enjoyed a 5-year safety record of 0 fatal accident in commercial air travel. The International Air Transport Association, IATA, earlier reported that airlines on the African continent did fairly well in safe operations in 2020, though there is room for improvement through the implementation of the International Civil Aviation Organization safety-related standards and recommended practices. Airlines based in sub-Saharan Africa experienced 6 accidents in 2020, 2 of which were fatal, both involving turboprop aircraft. It was the same number of fatal accidents that occurred in 2019. Nevertheless, the fatality risk increased owing to the fact that there were fewer flights in 2020. There were no hull loss accidents involving jet aircraft. Now, we need to bring an expert to talk about military plane crashes, possible causes, and the way forward.
My name is Air Vice Marshal Chris Ndubisi Chukwu, retired. Retired from the service in 2016. But by the grace of God, I've been, since then, highly involved in consultancy with the Nigerian Air Force and our war colleges. And I've also been involved in training, ground training of our pilots. So I've been fairly engaged, so to say, partially, even though in retirement.
Our guests, a retired Air Force officer, will be expected to give an account of how it was, an assessment of how it is. He is retired Air Vice Marshal Chris Ndubisi. I first of all want to know from him 3 military plane crashes within 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months. What is happening? And are we safe to say that there seems to be secrecy in unveiling the outcome of investigations?
I must agree with you that is disastrous for Nigeria, what has happened in the past few months. We cannot mince our words. We must agree that it is unprecedented. It's not normal. You know, I also use the opportunity to extend my condolences to the families of those who lost their lives there, and my condolence to the Chief of the Air Staff, the President, and everybody that is involved. This is very sad. It only reminds me about, the rate of tragedy reminds me about when we lost almost 150 officers in a C-130 crash in 1992 in Ejigbo. And although that was more terrible. So it is really sad, and we pray that it doesn't happen again. What do I think about it? It is unfortunate, like I said. I believe the first thing that one should say is to assure Nigerians that, look, what has happened has not been through any form of negligence. What we have seen in these 3 series of accidents and incidents is not through any deliberate, I can say that, deliberate lapses from the Air Force, not deliberate lapses in training, and I can almost tell you that contrary to speculations, people should not start speculating sabotage. And investigations, accident investigation boards are on. Preliminary investigations come out, but until the full investigation is out and the actual causes are determined, one is careful to begin to postulate and infer what are likely clauses. Whatever the case may be, we must remember that accidents are a chain as a result of a chain of events. It may not be one single incident that causes it, although eventually most aircraft accidents end up one way or the other. Most of them end up with a human error. And among the human error, most will still end up with pilot error. Nevertheless, that's not to say that the pilot is always that negligent or culpably negligent. That's why we always complain that no matter what happens in flight, you must be able to trace it to somebody's lapse one way or the other. So I don't know. In the very last one, we are reliably informed. Well, I think I'm reliably informed that it's known that weather is a factor. When we say weather is a factor, a factor. A factor may not be that it is exactly weather. Weather could be a factor. Again, investigating teams will ask you if weather is a factor, why was it not detected? Or why was it not avoided? And why was the airplane not able to overcome it? And, there are many things that come in. First of all, there is no, I don't think there are deliberate attempts to shield the results of accident investigation from the public. But while the investigations are going on, it is necessary to maintain a certain level of confidentiality. It is, because for obvious reasons, you don't want to compromise thoughts. There are family members are involved, and nerves can easily get tense. And so you need a very seclusive atmosphere to conduct that investigation before the information becomes until such a time that conclusion is made, a conclusive investigation is made. Then normally reports normally come. Let me give you an example. I think it was in 2014 or so when we lost General Azazi and Governor Yakowa on a helicopter crash. Yes, that investigation took so long, but it took that long because preliminary investigation found out that a probable engine fault was involved. It could be a factor, and so they had to take some time to take the engine. It requires some examination, some special tests that needed to be done in the factory of production. And so that investigation took about a year or so. Well, I'm not too sure, but it took longer than the public were expecting. And speculations began to rise. We said it, the governor, and people became apprehensive. But eventually, the result came out. The National Assembly got the reports. All I can say now is that, yes, it was traceable to some kind of engine fault. So in these last ones, again, preliminary investigations have come, and it is not hidden. First, like this last one, we have a lead towards weather. The previous one, the one where we lost 8 officers, we do have a preliminary pointer towards an engine failure. Okay, if there is a preliminary pointer towards an engine failure, does not mean that nobody can be blamed. Why did the engine fail? What happens to the other engine? Is this a single engine, twin engine? What caused the engine to fail? And why is the pilot not able to handle it if it failed? And so on and so forth. So that's why it's not easy, it's not very advisable to quickly jump into conclusion. Okay, so, and in terms, as regards this one, to allay your fears about the transparency of the Nigerian Air Force in investigating these things, This very last one, the AIB is involved. That is the authority in charge of the civil authority in charge of Accident Investigation Bureau, they call it. They have been invited by the Air Force to be part of it, even at the preliminary stage where it happened in Kaduna. So nothing is going to be hidden. The one that has happened, the one involving the 8 officers, is not conclusive. It will come out. So please, there is no deliberate, it's no deliberate attempt to shield information from the public. It's just being cautious so that people don't jump into conclusion before the end of the investigation.
Some observers believe that part of the problem is poor maintenance and not conducting proper checks. While attending to this check issue, it's good to know from him age of the latest beechcraft.
First of all, I have to tell you something which you may not agree. The Nigerian Air Force or military aviation, Air Force aviation all over the nation are more thorough in maintenance and in training proficiency than obtains in civil aviation. For example, the Beechcraft 350 is of course is civil manufactured aircraft. The Nigerian Air Force has to ensure that it maintains that we maintain our minimum maintenance standard as well as manufacturers' maintenance standards. Yes, we may not have to invite them to come and check, but we right to send us information to ground the aircraft because they have not seen so and so check done. They have the mandate. So no corners are caught in maintenance in the Air Force fleet. And the same thing with training. Maybe I should hold on training. Your question was specifically on maintenance. So we have even a double standard of maintenance. We have to fulfill Air Force standard maintenance, and we have to fulfill civil, the manufacturer. There is a whole directorate of liaising with civil aviation. There is a whole directorate, a whole branch that is involved with ensuring that the periodic maintenances, like you say, A, B, and C checks are done. If they need to go out abroad, they are sent abroad. And these are the things we are saying. And that's why sometimes we can ground the aircraft if there's no money to send it out. You ground the aeroplane, especially on transport fleets. We do not joke with the transport fleet. Even the fighter or combat fleet, we do not joke with their maintenance. The only difference is that maybe the pilot of a fighter aircraft or a combat aircraft may decide to take a little bit more risk than of one carrying passengers because he's supposed to go there and fight. You don't just turn back because it's raining or something like that, for example. This particular Beechcraft, our Beechcraft, I think they were acquired in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. That's about 6 years old, 7 years old. Okay, an aircraft that is 6, 7 years old is still a new aircraft. They were quite new. I can testify to that. I was a branch chief when those aircraft were delivered to the Nigerian Air Force. They were flown in by the manufacturer. They were received, if I remember, it was during the tenure of Air Marshal Amosu. And all the branch chiefs, all of us were there. I went into the aircraft, we were all happy.
This is Accountability Africa, and my guest is retired Air Vice Marshal Chris Ndubisi. What does he have to say about the training of officers?
Like I said earlier, the Nigerian Air Force has not compromised on its training standards. We have not, and I've been involved, maybe no longer in the flying training, but at least in the ground training and academics. And I know that we don't compromise. I will tell you where I may advise the national attention, but not on the standard of training. Most of the young officers flying now, including the pilot of this last aircraft, trained overseas, trained abroad, and they have their periodic recurrency. They go for simulator periodically as their civil authority requires every commercial pilot to go. They also go for that. They go for simulator, instrument, and emergency back to the factory to get recurrent. And so the military is probably more thorough. The Air Force is more thorough in training than in civil aviation. You've got military as well as while you are training, for example, in the Air Force flying training, by side, you take examinations required by civil aviation to get your private pilot license, also to get your commercial pilot license. When you get to that phase, they come from the civil aviation to administer the examination to you. Okay? And if it's supposed to be flying a twin engine to get that, they must inspect and make sure that it's a twin engine that you are rated on before you. So you are even a little more professional than the person trained through, for example, the Civil Aviation School in Zaria or in Ilorin. There are certain maneuvers we do, and there are certain things we do in pilot training that makes you, the military pilot, even more proficient than through pure civil flying. Okay? That is why when you retire, especially if you retire as a civil pilot in the Air Force, you are a hotcake. You're a hotcake in the civilization. They prefer to grab you because they know you've had a wonderful training and you've had a disciplined approach to flying and so on and so forth. So there is no, we cannot fault the training sequence. Now, let me tell you where I personally have seen some, a room for caution. There was a time, a period in the history of this nation, when the Air Force was neglected. You may know. In fact, when the armed forces were neglected, but the Air Force, being a highly technical service, suffered the most. In the 90s and early part of the millennium, we hardly trained. There was no training. Virtually, pilot training was grounded because, as it was rumored, a particular administration did not see the need to have a strong Air Force, if you may put it like that. And so there was an onset of a generation gap. That generation gap has been closed because the past one or two service chiefs have intensified pilot training. We have quite a number of young pilots.
Now, with 3 drops in quick succession, you will not blame Nigerians if they are now afraid and start asking, is even the president safe? Second, how is the welfare of officers in the Air Force?
The president is as safe as anything. All air forces have to have the presidential fleet commanded also of both military and highly experienced civil pilots. Okay? The president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. He is the highest authority who cannot leave that responsibility of moving him around at short notice in the hands of civilian managers. No. Let me tell you, do you know that at least for every flight the president is going, the commander of the presidential fleet has to be on board, even though he's not the one flying? That's to tell you, for example, some of the cautions is this absolute extraordinary checks and balances built into the presidential fleet movement. I think nobody should even think of having hitches, except what they call act of God or whatever, but everything is thoroughly done Some of us, when we were young officers, I used to have a sticker on my car that says, "My take-home pay cannot take me home." There was a time it was that bad. But of remuneration in the military, in the Air Force, I think also Navy and Army is commensurately okay. Very comfortable. A young officer can go to a bank and pick up a new car by virtue, I'm not saying pay cash, by virtue of his salary.
Yeah, that can fall back to.
Thank you. The bank can look at the salary expectations of a flight lieutenant and easily grant him a loan payable within 2-3 years. It was never like that during our time. You had to struggle it through your nose.
Accountability Africa is the program. We do this every week, and my guest today is retired Air Vice Marshal Chris Ndubisi. How can we stem the tide of these crashes?
Thank you. Let me even start with the Air Force. Right now, I forgot to let you know that the Chief of the Air Staff, following these 3 series of crashes that happened so close to each other, has constituted what they call a safety audit team, a safety audit committee of both serving and retired trained safety officers to audit every flying, go and look into the safety records and safety standards of all the flying units and recommend. Now, that is not to say that there wasn't. The Nigerian Air Force already has in place a well-structured safety management system. We have a safety institute, and it's already there. But when things happen like this, in order to rule out any lapses along the line, perhaps, who knows, by virtue of our engagement in operations all over the place, certain aspects may have been overlooked. So right now, he has, in order to forestall, check this trend, he has instituted that committee, and they have already begun to work.
That will be all on this edition of Accountability Africa. You can be part of this through this WhatsApp message line, 0806503030, or through email, odionbello@gmail.com. You have something to... Please go ahead and present him or her. Let's meet again next time. I am Odion Bello. Stay blessed.